So now we're starting. Before you start to sew together the shoulder seams, you have to finish them off with a desired method. I personally prefer the overlocker. If you don't have one, a zigzag is also fine. Or if you plan to add a lining, you can also leave it unfinished. This is something that I'd like to mention. Me personally, even if I work with a lining, I always prefer to finish it off because it just makes your garment more long-lasting, especially if you plan to wash your jacket in the future. So you just pin it together and you will sew with a 1 centimeter seam allowance all along the shoulder seam, and you do the same for the other side as well. After sewing the shoulder seams, you have to press apart the seam allowance on the back of your fabric on the wrong side, so you get smooth and thin seams that don't add up on the shoulder. To finish your arms and to set the sleeves in, there are two options. If you work with fine fabrics and thin fabrics, you can just sew the sleeves in. You can set them in and finish off the edge afterwards. But if you work with thicker fabrics like coating or similar stuff, I would recommend to you to finish off the armhole first and also the upper edge of the sleeve, the top, and to sew it together afterwards. This is how I would do it here because I use a coating fabric in this tutorial, but you can, if you have fine fabrics, as I said, you can do it as shown in the instructions, that you first set the sleeve in and then finish off the edge. To set in the sleeve, you first take your sleeve and you fold it in half, like when you have cut the sleeve, and mark with a needle or with a pen, it's up to you, where the center of the sleeve is the center fold. Then you put it right sides facing on your front and back bodice along the shoulder seam, and the needle that you just marked for the center fold of your sleeve is where you will add it to the shoulder seam of your bodice. This pattern does not have a front or a back in your sleeve, so it does not matter on which side you add the sleeve. Afterwards, you pin the underarm area and then you fill up with pins all along the edge. Do the same for the second sleeve, and after you finish, you will sew with 1 centimeter seam allowance. This sleeve does not have any gathering at the top of your shoulder, so it should fit in smoothly and without any bulky areas. After setting in the sleeves and sewing the sleeve in, you now have the option. Either you have already finished your edges like I did, then you will press them apart. Or if you haven't finished them but you don't use a lining in your design, then I recommend to you to now finish it off, both layers together. Or if you choose to add a lining, you also have the option to just leave it unfinished and to press it apart to have it as a most thin seam as possible. After setting in the sleeves and pressing the seam allowance apart or pressing it to the shoulder, you now have the option that you can finish off all the side edges of your sleeve and your jacket bodice before you sew the side seams. This is something that I highly recommend if you don't use a lining, or if you have a fabric that is has the tendency to fray, or if you, like me, prefer just to have a really nice finish also inside the lining. Afterwards, you fold over the front to the back, right sides facing, and you first pin your underarm area with a seam where you sewed the sleeve to the bodice exactly on top of each other. This will give you a really nice underarm seam and it looks professional. Then you pin the hem of your sleeve on top of each other and you fill up with pins. You do the same for the bodice. You will pin the end of your bottom hems together and fill in with pins so that you can sew the side seam of your whole side all along the sleeves, over the underarm area, down to the hem. No matter if you have finished off your sides or not, press apart the seam allowance. Your outer jacket is now finished. Next step would be to add the pockets. If you don't want pockets, you can just go over to adding belt loops or the belt. Or if you also don't want it, next step would be lining or adding the collar if you don't want a lining. If you opt for pockets, please check now while trying on if the pockets are on the height that you like, or move otherwise the line up or down on your front coat.